He felt that it was almost like being one of the old Brill Building writers. That's something that he was fascinated by, the whole idea of having to suddenly have to put together a song and throw it out there. So he was just really intrigued by the whole idea, but I think to a certain extent it also got to the point where he was used to doing an album in a couple of weeks, and 2 years I think it just got to the point where he was like, enough.
In the summer of 1980, Waits took time out from working at Coppola's Zoetrope Studios to record an album of his own. Unlike his work for the One from the Heart soundtrack, this record would see Waits continue to venture into the new musical territory hinted at by the Blue Valentine album. Again, Bones Howe was asked to collaborate from an early stage.
We went in the rehearsal room, and he had this electric guitar. And he had this amplifier that looked like it had been dropped from the top of a high-rise and sounded like it had been dropped from the top of the high-rise. And he said, I want to have this kind of a sound. And he went, you know, that thing that's on Heart Attack and Vine. It was something that he wanted to test, and because he had played acoustic guitar on some of his very early records, where he was still kind of a folk singer, in a strange kind of a folk singer, but a folk singer. But he hadn't really, the piano had become the instrument more and more as we made the records we made up to that point. And this was sort of the introduction of an electric guitar, but an electric guitar that wasn't like an electric guitar that was on everybody else's records. It was sort of, you know, this kind of funky, distorted sounding guitar. And he wanted to have that kind of quality about it. In a way, it was sort of a guitar that sounded like Tom would sound if he were a guitar. You know, it just was, it fit his voice somehow.
Songs like Heart Attack and Vine, I think, is such a, it's such an amped up, such an overt blues song. I think to a large extent he may have been led towards these songs by his voice and what that was turning into. I mean, if you have a voice like Tom Waits, then doing, you know, Osmond's Family style pop ballads is not much of an option. You are kind of pushed towards doing blues and jazz by having a voice like that. And also his lyrical sensibility was very, very in tune with that kind of music. I think it actually feels very natural. There's nothing on Heart Attack and Vine that feels forced at all, I don't think.
Heart Attack and Vine, I think it's him sort of champing at the bit. It's very, very guitar driven. It's very rhythmic. It's very pounding. I mean, there are a couple of songs that recall vintage balladeer Tom Waits, the Waits of Tom Trollope's Blues on Heart Attack and Vine, but it's quite a staccato, it's quite jagged, it's sort of really rough at the edges record, and I think that's something he was very, very keen to. He was very conscious to try and shake that old Tom Waits persona away. It's still there on the Nickel, which I think is one of the most beautiful songs, not just Waits, but one of the most beautiful songs anybody's ever written. It's a lovely melody and beautifully scored. I mean, really, you know, again, very poignant. That it was for a film about down and outs in Los Angeles, and you know, the lives which had just gone to waste and amounted to nothing. But you know, there's some vestige of humanity, and you know, they were somebody's son, you know, and that they had a life, they had a story, and Waits told it. You know, beautifully. I think so. It's a beautiful, beautiful song.
The sticks and stones can break my bones, but always will be true.
Well, Tom was not a crooner. We'll get this straight to begin with. Tom was not a crooner, but there was a mournful quality in his voice when he sang a ballad. He he understood how down and out people felt, and he could put that into his music. He could carry that feeling emotionally and put it right into his music as he performed. He was the champion in a lot of ways musically of the down and out.
Only American capitalism could have produced the songs of Tom Waits, because there's a sense of this kind of human kind of detritus, these kind of people who are just kind of cast off by the system here, that I don't think exists in most other industrialized countries where there's more of a social net. I think in America it's possible to just kind of fall off the cultural map, who are not in tune with this kind of great, bright American optimism, who are not upwardly mobile, all of those kind of great things, the American dream. We're not living that dream, those characters could only exist here, that Tom Waits explores. Those characters could only exist kind of in opposition to that. This is the anti-story, it's the other story of America that that he's interested in, and not from a social protest Woody Guthrie standpoint, but from kind of almost just a human narrative standpoint. Who was that person? What was possible for that person? What was his dream? What were her possibilities? What did they want? There's not a lot of tolerance in America for losers. It's not a culture that cares much about those people. Well, Tom Waits made art out of that possibility, that sense that, well, here's this other terrain that nobody's interested in looking at, So he went there and he looked at it.
Heart Attack and Vine is quite a diverse album. It's a record that showcases his versatility, perhaps in a way that previous albums hadn't. I mean, you listen to a song like Jersey Girl, and it sounds more like Springsteen than Springsteen, really.
Down the shore, everything's alright. You and your baby on a Saturday night. Don't you know when my dreams come true?
The reason that Jersey Girl stands out, and certainly stood out from Tom Waits' catalogue up until that point, is that it was absolutely nothing like anything else he'd ever done in a lot of very important respects. When he'd written love songs before, they were always either third-person narratives of kind of desperate or doomed love, or they were very backhanded, very wry. I mean, often very funny and very sweet, but kind of bleak and kind of sarcastic. This is an absolutely straightforward love song. It's often said to have been written about his wife Kathleen Brennan, who I think he married that year or shortly afterwards, and who was from New Jersey. There's a little waver in the first line when it's Tom Waits, I think, trying a little too hard to impose Tom Waits on it, when he talks about not wanting no whores on 8th Avenue, which I think is, it actually jars really badly with the rest of the song and almost overbalances it. In fact, when Springsteen covered it, he changed the line to "The Girls on 8th Avenue," which a lot of people, I think, sneered at as Springsteen bowdlerizing the song for a mainstream audience, but I actually think makes it a better song, because it just makes the entire song very straight-faced and very sincere. And the sha-la-la-la thing, he'd never done anything like that before, and in the context of the song, especially when it comes in again after that fantastic line in the coda, "And I call your name, I can't sleep at night," it does sound like a man who's so happy he's literally lost for words, and that's why the song works, and that's why people really like it. It's a fantastic song.
Whereas Heart Attack and Vine was a notable success, the film One from the Heart was a commercial and critical disaster, bankrupting Coppola's Zoetrope Studios and signalling, in part, the end of the director-led auteur cinema of the 1970s. Yet the soundtrack, which teamed Waits with country star Crystal Gayle, contained some of his best work of the decade.
Broken bicycles.
It was a very fruitful collaboration. I mean, I love One from the Heart. I know it's not very fashionable to like it, but even at the time, I just thought it was. I mean, it's what, in a sense, it's what movies are about. I mean, you sort of sit there and and the fake curtains part on the screen, and what you're seeing is this complete fantasy world that Coppola conjures up.
Little boy blue can blow your heart. The dish run away with a spoon. Home again, it's Saturday morn, and never gets up before noon. She used to render you legal and tender when you used to send her your promises, boy.
I think the melodies, the songs, and that extraordinary combination of Tom Waits, who by now his voice was shot to hell, and Crystal Gayle had this beautiful, angelic country, the purity of her voice, that marrying those two together is very audacious. Bette Midler was meant to do it, but contractually they couldn't work it out, so I think Waits came up with suggesting Crystal Gayle. But he was, when I spoke to him, he was absolutely besotted with Coppola and delighted with the experience of working on a proper movie.
It's got to be love, I've never felt this way. Oh baby, this one's from my heart.
When the 1982 Oscar nominees were announced, Waits found himself amongst a notable set of veteran contenders. The One from the Heart soundtrack was overlooked in favour of Henry Mancini's Victor and Victoria, but the experience had significantly increased Waits' profile. Yet he was about to make a dramatic change in his musical approach.
If you look at the scene, which is called Used Carlotta, we called Used Carlotta in the movie, where Freddie Forrest is conducting all these junkyard cars, and there's a kind of a cacophonic symphony playing while he's conducting, and there's all these junk cars piled up on top of each other like a junkyard.
I call this Used Carlotta.
That sort of was a clue to me about where Tom wanted to go with his music next.
The soundtrack would mark the end of a distinctive period in Waits' career. Shortly after its completion, he cut his ties with both Herb Cohen and Asylum Records, and his music was about to enter a startling new phase that spelt the end of his collaborative partnership with Bones Howe. The barroom pianist persona would soon go through an unexpected metamorphosis that left the old Waits sound behind.
So when we came to our parting of the ways, I realized that where he wanted to go, I couldn't go with him, because I couldn't work with him on something that I didn't really love about, you know, what he was doing. And we got together under a certain kind of musical situation. He didn't want to keep going that way. He was tired of doing it, or whatever reason. And where he wanted to go, I couldn't take him. So we parted, you know, I think for very good reason.
Sane, all insane. The fireman's blind, the conductor's lame. Cincinnati Jack, sad luck day. Hang out the window with a bottle full of rain. Clap hands. Clap hands.
The new Waits that emerged in the 1980s was to many a revelation, the most unique and fearless manifestation of the 1970s singer-songwriter imaginable, while others felt the loss in the passing of the Waits persona that they had grown to love.
It's fine to have your own musical conception that is, all right, I grant you, going against the current, pretty original. As I said, I liked it the first time I heard it. It was a relief to hear that single horn. But there's always another question. And that question is, how good are the songs? And I think the songs aren't that good. I think the best of them are fine. But if they're not fine, well, who cares? I mean, but the thing is that even though I think the songs are better, about the new music, I do care. To me, it seems far more original. And you can say, you know, that he's stuck with Jack Kerouac and that world, but it seems to me that no, that isn't really true. That something changes.